everybody. David Kennedy, Canopy Realtor Association MLS president, here with another ordinary realtor who has done some extraordinary things. Hi there.
Hi, how are you, David?
I'm good.
Good.
So how long have you been in real estate, Micki?
Say that again. How am I doing what?
How long have you been in real estate?
Let's see. I'll have to stop and think. 69.
What was it like to get in real estate in 1969?
Very interesting because I thought I would do it part-time. My children had my two. One was older, 9, 1, 5. So I thought, I can do this part-time. So I got the license, and it was almost 1 month to the day after I got my license. I had affiliated with the firm, and I had a little conference with the family. I said, I personally cannot do this part-time. It is a full-time job. So they got behind me. They said, whatever you want to do, you know, we'll support you. Well, they didn't realize what they were saying because I would hop on an airplane. Now remember, 69.
Mm-hmm.
More men, not as many women
Okay.
in the real estate business. But I wanted to learn more than what my local and state could give me. But I would hop on an airplane by myself and just go to the national meetings.
Huh.
And so, like I say, they didn't realize when they said, we'll support you, how involved that was going to be.
So when's the last time you've hopped on a plane and gone to national meetings?
I am on was on a working group for federal tax on the national level. That's been a year and a half ago, I guess.
Okay.
They wanted me to fly up for a 24-hour meeting that we were holding. So
still
it was
at it.
working breakfast, working lunch, working dinner for 24 hours, and then fly back to Charlotte.
So that's amazing. So still going strong. What was Charlotte like in 1969 when you got in the business? You remember?
Well, as I said, more men than women were in the business. DeLacy Wyman, I don't know if any of you remember, but he was known as Mr. Real Estate.
Okay.
Never wanted a large firm, did not have a training program. And it was interesting, I will have to tell you, when I went in, well, I interviewed 5 companies when I got my license. They all offered me a position except Wyman. And that intrigued me. So I called him and I said, I'd like to come back and talk with you. I have been offered a place everywhere I've interviewed except with you. Well, I went back for the interview and he started chuckling when I repeated, is there something that you saw in me that I should not get into this business, or you didn't want me at your firm? He started chuckling and he said, Micki, I could see all potential. But he said, I wanted you to tell me that you wanted to come here. And rather than, I was not thinking that way. I was trying to make the decision. But he said, I wanted you to tell me that you really wanted to come to this firm.
So did you end up working for him?
So I made my decision within 24 hours.
Okay.
That's where I'm going.
All right. So did you, if you're getting into business in 1969, what was it like? Did you feel like one of the few women? Was it difficult for women to get to get into real estate? Was it different back then, or was it a pretty easy deal?
No, it was not difficult. I just think that it was more a man's world in the real estate business, and little by little, more and more women became involved. Now I think it's just the opposite. I think that, I don't know what the statistics are, but I think that probably be equal,
Okay.
or maybe even more women.
So you mentioned once you got your license, you were immediately involved. What kind of drew you to get involved here locally with the Charlotte Board of Realtors, Charlotte Realtor Association?
Well, that's an interesting question, because DeLacy Wyman said to me right off, you need to get involved. And he said, my recommendation is to start with the membership committee at the Charlotte Board. So that was my first committee, was membership, and I started right off.
So I'm reading, and did you chair the MLS committee in '84? Do I have my years right? You chaired the MLS committee at some point.
Yes, and I'm not sure it was '84 either.
Well, this was back when were we using MLS books back then?
Oh, yes.
So how were the books? How were those?
Well, we would pick our books up once a week, and each agent went through, made all the changes, pulled out the solds, but you made all the changes in your books.
So were you a part of a movement to go from the books to more computerized? Yes. So a lot of folks, just generally speaking, can be resistant to change, but here we lie maybe some computerization of the listing books. How did that come about, and how was that?
We did have resistance. People still wanted the paper book, but I think it just took time for people to realize that the convenience of not having the book and being able to not have to make the changes themselves. So it just took time.
Did you see, or do you remember seeing like some firms already doing the computerized listings, and then some firms had the books, and maybe not everybody was looking at the same information at the same time? Did you see that? Was it a bit of a disconnect?
Yes. I will say that the Wyman Company was the first. I don't even know what the machine was called, but it was a huge, big machine that we leased, I guess, brought to the office. All the MLS data was input into this machine. A buyer, seller, could come into our office, and it's really almost funny now, but put in the criteria, and then all these cards would start falling out in different categories, whatever you were asking for. So we were the first that had something other than the book. And so with that introduction that we had, we were one of the first to say it's all good now that we have the book.
It almost seemed like I think the association could purchase the terminals, the computers that your firm would use, and they would, like you said, the association would lease the terminals to the firms, and that's how the firms could afford to make the jump from the listing books to computers. Because back then computers were incredibly expensive. It was difficult to own it. So if the association, like I think you said, they leased it to the firms, and then the firms could use that. So you were in the midst of all that in the MLS. Did it require a membership vote? Was this just a board vote? Do you remember those specifics?
It did go to membership, but it came back to a board vote. Okay. As the final.
So you did MLS strategy. You made big changes, which turned to be the precursor to kind of the MLS and the IDX, which is the Internet Data Exchange that we have today. And you were also there on the foundation side, if we could change gears, and in some of the early fundraising events for what we now call the Canopy Housing Foundation. What are some of the memories that stand out on the foundation side of things, the fundraising?
That's probably one of my best things, I guess, to remember. The charitable foundation, which is now the Housing Opportunity Foundation, was established late 85, early 86. I was president in 86. And we had identified what the charitable foundation was all about and the funds that we would, as a board, like to be able to contribute money to help. And I could see, I think, if my memory serves me, we had about $13,000 in the charitable foundation. That doesn't go very far.
Right.
So that was 86 when I was president. 87, I chaired the charitable foundation for the Charlotte Board.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something to really boost those funds. And what better idea than to have Habitat for Humanity as our theme for a fundraiser. Jimmy Carter was coming that year, and I felt that we could get Jimmy Carter to our fundraiser. It would bring in more bucks.
So he was going to be in town at the Charlotte Coliseum for an event, and you somehow got into his people and were calling him to come to your event. Just want to do a drop-in. Were you selling it? Hey, it's just a drop-in?
That was very interesting because, and I actually do not remember the channels I went through to find out how to be in touch with those that organized Jimmy Carter's trips, where he went, the whole bit. But I did. I found it. And I called and told them the plans that we were trying to fund Habitat for Humanity. I had been to the Charlotte Board and sold them on being a master builder. That was another thing. The board of directors said, "Micki, you're not going to be able to raise $50,000." And I said, "Well, we'll see. But if we can get Jimmy Carter there, that will certainly help us." The gentleman that I was talking to said, "Mrs. Fisher, we cannot let Jimmy Carter attend your fundraiser because it's at a private home. We'll have to have security there at least 2 weeks ahead, and it's just out of the question." Well, David, I didn't give up on that. And I called him periodically as we were making our plans. And I'm sure he was very disgusted with every time he'd see Micki Fisher is calling you. So this went on as we kept making our plans for our fundraiser until almost a week prior to the event. And I'm conducting the meeting of the charitable board. And I said, "I'm going to call one more time." So I suspended the meeting, go to the phone, and call this gentleman. And his first words were, again, "Mrs. Fisher, I don't know how many times I've told you we cannot get Jimmy Carter at that fundraiser." I said, "Well, I want you to do me a real favor. I want you to go to Jimmy Carter and tell him that This committee with the Charlotte Board is trying to raise $50,000. Charlotte people can go to the Coliseum where he will be speaking and not have to pay. Our fee to come to the fundraiser was $35. So I said, I feel like people will be going to the Coliseum instead of coming to my fundraiser. I want you to ask Jimmy if he will just come by there for 15 minutes to help me raise $50,000. Well, his very words were, "You drive a hard bargain." I said, "Well, just call me. Just ask him." I got a call back that afternoon late. He said, "I can promise you not 100%, but 90% sure he'll be there." I said, "That's all I need. My invitations are going out at the end of this week that says Jimmy Carter will be there."
So did you got a 90% guarantee, quote unquote, that he was coming? Did he make it? Did he come?
He did. And the invitations went out. It was really about a week before the event. I remember vividly the security coming into the drive and Jimmy Carter walking into the foyer of this home where we were holding the event. He and Rosalind and their entourage of security and so forth. Jimmy walked to the back balcony area where overlooking the yard, but then he immediately went down into the crowd of people, shaking hands, absolutely loving it. Security is standing there. They had told me they would only give me 15 minutes because they had to get to the Coliseum. So security was standing there and they were looking at their watch doing this and saying, "We got to get him." And so I go to Rosalind and hand her the mic, and I said, "Rosalind, could you get Jimmy up on this terrace to say a few words to everyone?" So she was very proper, and "Mr. President, we need you up on the terrace." He either did not hear her or he ignored her because he was truly into talking with the people. So the security looked at me and said, so I go back to Rosalind and I said, "Get him up here." So she gets on the mic, and I'll never forget, she said, "Hey, Jimmy, get yourself up on the terrace. We've got to get to the Coliseum, but we need you to say something to the group." Well, he heard that, came up, and did a beautiful welcome to everyone, thankful that what we were doing, and just a wonderful speech that he made to the entire group.
So I look back on all the effort you made to get that done. What was it? And I look back to all the efforts you did MLS-wise too. It seemed like it was worth it. It seemed like it all worked out.
Well, we raised a little over $21,000 at that event towards the 50 that we had taken on as a master builder for the Charlotte Board. But let me just go one step further with Jimmy. Hugh McCall held a dinner the next evening. My husband and I were invited because of what, I had shared this fundraiser. Jimmy Carter, when he saw me coming into the room, walked over and said, "Hello, Micki." I mean, just like he had known me all of his life. I gained a new respect for Jimmy Carter during that fundraiser event.
All right, so when you became president in 1986, there was no CEO, there was no staff leader here. That was quite a challenge for you. How did you meet that challenge?
That's what I wanted to talk about a little bit, because Phil had resigned just basically at the end of the year, and so I started my year without an executive officer. Those of us that have been in this business a while, we rely on these people that, with our board tremendously. Well, the first order was to form a search committee, along with the exec committee, to find another executive officer. In the meantime, the Charlotte board was my first visit every day to be sure everyone was in place, what mail had come in, what needed to be answered, and I would delegate who had to do what. This went on for several months, almost 3 before we hired an executive officer. Roy Curry, let me bring Roy in. Roy was our executive vice president. And Roy had been instrumental in all of the MLS changes that we were talking about that took effect also the year that I was president. And Roy Curry accepted a job as the CEO in Charleston, South Carolina. So he left first of the year also, sometime during the first. So we had no executive officer and no executive vice president. So I literally said when we hired this gentleman to become our executive officer, your first order is to plan this retreat. We had already scheduled a strategic planning retreat. I've forgotten, I think it was Sugar Mountain. And I said, your first order is to get this retreat put together because it was becoming very close that we had scheduled all the quarters for us to be there. Well, unfortunately, I realized within weeks that this executive officer would not work. So I had to be the one to tell him that we no longer needed his services. And actually, it was the day that we left to go to our retreat. So I delegated to all the people that were at our strategic planning things to do, but I orchestrated it, and we had a wonderful retreat. Came back, well, on the trip up, on the bus, I remember saying to everyone on that bus, I said, I am going for Roy Curry. We need Roy back here as our executive officer. And I don't know how long you knew Roy, but he had worked from the ground up. He knew everything about that board. He was the one that pretty much did all the changes for our new MLS. So I said, I'm going for Roy Curry. And while we're here on this retreat, you give me permission to negotiate between what dollars we can give him. So they did. And I'll never forget Roy saying 2 different times, you don't know what a tough negotiator I am. And I said, and you don't know how tough I am. So we got Roy Curry to come back as our executive officer, but that was like almost the middle of my year. Wow. So the first part was pretty tough.
So let's talk to what extent you were involved in regionalization, maybe not during your year as president, but when you were in leadership, I still to this day I sit on the MLS board with Lamar Keller, and Lamar out in Gaston, and there was at what point did we start working real well with Gaston County and Gastonia and sharing information and things back and forth? At what point did Charlotte kind of grow where we were doing business with them in terms of MLS?
That was pretty soon after, we made our new, the changes that we did. We started working very closely with Gaston County, Cabarrus County, with our areas around us. So that was not difficult.
Okay, good. So it seems like you had a good product with what you guys did when you went from the books to the MLS, and people were wanting to be a part of that. So you have done a lot. I try to cover it all. What am I missing in terms of stuff that you did that you're proud of? Some of the things that we haven't talked about that you look back and you're pleased that worked out, or you're happy. What are the things that you're proud of looking back?
Well, I guess another thing is the year I was president of our state, before I took office, and I remember when I was campaigning, there was a big movement about transfer tax, and I don't know if you remember that, but in addition to the excise tax, the legislature was coming up with transfer tax. So we were fighting that hand in tooth. And I've been on the legislative committee for many, many years, and I knew some of those legislators, and talking with them, they were confused because the state was saying on some occasions, we will agree to a transfer tax if the money is used for certain things. Well, the year I was campaigning for president of the state, I said, we're going to make this a campaign. This is going to be part of my campaign. We're going to do something. So we came up, I said, we just need to say no. And so that was our slogan, just say no.
Nice.
And the legislator said, now we understand. But we had stickers, brown stickers, we had big stickers, we had everything. Just say no.
And they did.
And so we defeated that.
Nice. What you have done, and you still continue to do so, we were talking about still the committees that you're on at a national level. So you were obviously local president in '86, state president in 2000.
That was 1995.
1995, okay. And then you're still working, you're still active at NAR on committees as well. Is that true?
True.
Still doing it? Now, which committee are you on currently?
Federal tax for the last several years.
So yeah, we talk about this, like how do you introduce more inventory to the market? And sometimes in my mind, I look back at the investors that have bought in 2007, 8, and 9 during the Great Recession when there was a tremendous amount of financially distressed homes. And what if any tax breaks could they get if they sold it to an owner occupant? Is that some of the, are you looking at tax strategies from that perspective?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the things. And the other is the capital gains tax. For people that have been in their homes for years and each year paid their tax, appreciation has been so great, they will owe a tremendous amount of money if they sell their homes. So the Federal Tax Committee has been working very hard on this. Now, we have to be very careful because, of course, whatever we recommend has to go through several other committees, public policy and so forth, and then to Congress. So we have to think about the wording that Congress might agree to. We're still working on that particular issue.
So you've had this amazing career from 1969 here to 2021. What advice would you give realtors today? What are things we should be mindful of? When you look at us, what would you hope we keep in mind? What would be a good takeaway for us to learn from you?
To be involved. Be involved not only on the local level, but also state and national. At least understand. That way you can better serve your clients in what is going on within the real estate business. So just be involved. One other thing before we end our interview, the year that I became president of the State Association, I ended up with no executive officer when I took office. Jim Bixel was our executive officer. He announced at the end of the year before I became president that he was retiring. So I went through the same process, an almost identical same process with hiring someone that did not work, and it was a tough year.
What goes through your mind when you hire the first, in both cases, you kind of hire one, it turns out to be a false start, and you got to go to him and say, yeah, it's not working out. And that's,
right.
And it happened twice. That's
right.
Incredible leadership.